Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, most flickery music nerd. I hope you're doing well, and it is time for a quick thought piece video where I will be talking about three reasons that I think the concept of this new Yesterday film, just based on the trailer alone, makes absolutely no sense. First, before I get too deep into it, I do want to mention that down there are some links to tour dates for the upcoming tour that I have, West Coast tour this May. Hope to see you guys there. And general admission and some VIP tickets are left via the link down below. Again, hopefully see you guys there. Okay, so if you guys haven't noticed, the internet has been lit up a little bit for the past 24 hours because there's been a lot of discussion about this new movie that has just been teased. Should be dropping later this year. It's titled Yesterday. It's also from the director of Slumdog Millionaire. And the whole concept and the idea of this movie is that this singer-songwriter type dude basically falls off his bike, he hits his head, and he essentially wakes up in a world where nobody knows who the Beatles are, and historically, I guess they just didn't even really happen. He's Googling the Beatles and John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and nothing's coming up, and it's like, oh my God, what's going on? I'm the only person on the planet who knows who the Beatles are and knows all these songs. And so then he proceeds, essentially, to start playing these classic Beatles tracks, and he's stunning people with them, and then before you know it, he's the greatest songwriter the world has ever known, and he's very popular, and he's in high demand because he's such a great songwriter, and so on and so forth. And I mean, as cute as the concept looks, and this is definitely, I think, a bit of a power fantasy that a lot of people who are huge music fans have probably had at some point in time. Like if they could have woken up one day and have written all of David Bowie's songs and then been not the next David Bowie, but the David Bowie instead of David Bowie, then, you know, that would be amazing. But there are a few reasons why this whole idea just does not work at all, and I'll sort of go through those right here. The first reason why the concept of this movie just doesn't make any sense to me is the influence of the Beatles music, because if you were really going to create a world where the Beatles had no impact and they were not there and they never occurred, they were never a thing, the current landscape would be so massively different because of how popular the Beatles were, because of the huge cultural impact that they made. I mean, at one point in the trailer, one of the singer-songwriter's friends says, it's a good song, but, you know, it's no Coldplay, so on and so forth. Like, would Coldplay even be here if not for the Beatles? I argue no, Coldplay would not be here if not for the Beatles, and a lot of other musicians as well. I mean, obviously music would still exist, but what we know now as popular music would be wildly different, and it feels like the movie, just based on the trailer, doesn't really account for that in any way, shape, or form outside of just everything's exactly the same, but nobody just knows who the Beatles are. I think you could certainly make a film where you try to theorize about what the world and the world of music would be like if the Beatles had never occurred, but it seems like this movie wants to essentially have its cake and eat it too by erasing the Beatles completely from historical musical existence, but also just have the world that we exist in be completely exactly the same. Maybe making a stink over this issue to some music fans might seem a bit ridiculous, but imagine instead if you had a scenario in a movie where all of a sudden the car was never invented, and we had a protagonist that was given the ability to one day wake up and invent the car. But then imagine this world this person wakes up in looking exactly the same as the world we know it now. There are even asphalt roads and traffic signs and lights going in every direction, yet nobody is driving an automobile or a bus over them. My next major issue with the premise of this movie is context. Not only are we living in a world where the Beatles never existed, and that doesn't make sense, as I've already established up until this point, if you're going to present us with a world that's pretty much exactly the same as the one we know today, but also, could you feasibly take all of these fantastic and great Beatles songs from the 60s and from the 70s and erase them from memory, and then fast forward time several decades later, and then just present them to people in 2018, 2019, and then all of a sudden they would catch on just the same as they would if it were the 1960s? Honestly, I think the sensation of the Beatles, part of the reason it was a sensation that happened at the time that it did, was because it happened at the time that it did. Especially if we're living in a world that without the Beatles is pretty much unchanged as this movie presents to us. A lot of the ideas and sounds and songs that are presented in this film are no longer cutting edge or no longer refreshing. I mean, to even get a bit of a foothold, our protagonist here would most likely need to be doing trap remixes of all these great Beatles songs. It's long been said that if artists like John Lennon or Paul McCartney were they getting started now in the music industry, the industry wouldn't sign them in a million years. And I actually stick pretty closely to that belief. Not only because the sounds and the talents of a McCartney or a Lennon or a Harrison aren't exactly in demand right now in the industry, but also I just don't think that the Fab Four would make all that much sense in 2019 and current marketing trends in music too. And that is my third major issue with the premise of this movie: marketing. Because I think there are a lot of naive music fans that might enjoy the cute premise of this film, but not really appreciate just how much marketing goes into promoting a particular artist or album or song. And that things in the music industry don't get popular simply by virtue of being good. Artists don't get tons of fans just by virtue of being talented, unfortunately. I wish it worked more that way, but it's not usually the case. And it's for that reason that I don't think you could merely just hand a bunch of random forgotten Beatles songs to some dude, just any dude, and then just have that person start playing them and all of a sudden they become the biggest music superstar the world has ever known. Not that talent can't shine through and not that cream can't rise to the top, but once you have good songs, it's not just a matter of playing them in front of people and then all of a sudden you're the next biggest thing. There would still have to be a gigantic multi-million-dollar music marketing machine behind this person in order to get them onto a platform where their music, their songs, their talents are actually making some kind of impact. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. Those are essentially my three major issues with the premise of this new Yesterday film. But all that being said, I mean, the production of the movie looks fine. The Beatles renditions played throughout the trailer seem fine. The acting, for the most part, seems okay. I'm sure this movie at the end of the day will be sound technically and will be utterly cute, but still, just as a music nerdy individual myself, I just had to kind of get out there my feelings on just how obnoxious I find this premise to be, and that's it. Feel free to get down there in the comments and sound off on your thoughts on the concept of this film. I would love to hear what you guys think. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. You're the best, you're the best, you're the best, you're the best. Anthony Fantano, Yesterday, forever.